Okay, any questions about anything before we start? One thing is that I've put online the assignment 2. And so what I'm going to do today is basically go through the type of things you'll need to do for assignment 2. So what I suggest you do is like watch what I do today, then go back and see if you can recreate it, what I did today, and then take a look at the homework assignment. And if and then on Tuesday, when we come in, I'll answer questions about the homework assignment. Also, next week in class, so next week we'll have class. The following week, we actually won't have class. The following week, I have to go to a conference. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just post a bunch of lectures online about the history. So I'll just post them online. So I'll give you the links for those. But just to let you know that the 26th and 28th is that we won't be meeting. It will just be only to watch YouTubes. And then we have a couple of weeks after that, then the midterm, and then a couple of weeks, then Thanksgiving, then a week, and then that's it. Right. So last week of class is the second midterm, so things will go quickly once we get through September. No questions about anything? Okay, so we're talking about health insurance. When I taught overseas, never used to talk about health insurance. And when I go to conferences overseas with, with other sort of health services research from other countries, is that they rarely talk about health insurance. And it's because in most systems, most countries that have like universal care or have some type of care, is that health insurance isn't an issue. Everyone gets health insurance. You either get it through, like if you, in the UK, you can just use the hospital. So basically that's your type of insurance. Or if you're in Germany, that, they say that you have to purchase insurance, but everyone purchases insurance. The government gives you a policy, the type of policy and such. And so it's not the same. But here, because health insurance coverage has always been so low and that we had so many bad policies for so many years, is that it has traditionally been in the US, the one major thing that we focus on is getting people health insurance. Like even now, we just finished this big study on farm workers in California. So we interviewed 1,500 farm workers, and now we're kind of looking at, what is the next step to try and get farm workers, access to good health care and get primary care and secondary care and everything else. And the number one issue is health insurance. So it's how to get a Medi-Cal, basically, how to get farm workers Medi-Cal. So health insurance in the US is the most important thing, the most important barrier that people have to getting good type of health care. All right, so last time we started talking about health insurance, went through and I talked about how there's, what you pay is premiums. So what, how much you pay each month is premiums. Health insurance works. The way health insurance works is that you pay a certain amount on a regular basis, and then hopefully you never need it. But if you do need it, then you'll probably get a lot of money to pay off your claim. And so you pay a little bit, and on the off chance that you're going to need a whole lot. So, the classic example is house insurance. So health insurance, you pay a certain amount per month or per year, and then hopefully you never need it. But if you do need it, then you're going to need $500,000 to rebuild a house. Then we talked about this idea of a fair premium. And remember, a fair premium, that's where the sum of all the premiums equals the expected losses. That's what a fair premium is. And we talked about how, well, in reality, insurance companies, make money in different ways. But this idea of a fair premium is what we're going to be focusing upon. Okay, so we'll go through some examples. So first example, so suppose the insurance company knows how much you will cost, and suppose there are 10 people buying insurance. So they know that everyone's going to cost $2,000, and they know that so they know for certain. What's the fair premium? So what's the fair premium? Well, if there's 10 people, how much is the total loss is going to be? Yeah. 2,000, right? Yeah, 2,000. Because that's what everyone's, there's 10 people. You add up all the total losses from those 10 people, and that comes out to 20,000. Divide by 10, that's 2,000. So I'll show you an Excel file here. Okay. So in this case, then you have 10 people, right? Number, so number of accidents, each person is going to get one accident. Each person will lose $2,000, will cost $2,000. So the total amount is $20,000. You divide 20,000 by the number of people, and that gives you $2,000. $20,000 total premiums, but it gives you $2,000 average cost per person. And so therefore you charge everyone $2,000. And since the premiums here equal the losses, that's a fair premium. Now, how many people know, show me your familiarity with Excel? Like, I know Excel very well too. I know Excel a little bit too, never had to use Excel. Okay. If you've never had to use Excel, get Excel and learn how to use it because it's really valuable. And especially for things, just simple things like we're going to go through today. If you understand how to use Excel, you'll do a lot better in terms of understanding how we're getting all these numbers. So you notice that what Excel does is that, up here, when you click on this box on C4, it's D4, it shows you up here what the equation is. So in this case, it's saying, whoops, stop. Right again. It's saying you have a $2,000 times C4, where C4 is this number here, the number of accidents. So it's number. So let's say instead of one accident, what if everyone got in 2 accidents? Okay, so let's change this to 2, all the way down. 2, 2, whoops, come back. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. So if everyone got 2 accidents, now the total is 2,000 times 2, so 4,000 per loss per person. So a total of 40,000. So the fair premium is basically you take this number here, this total losses, divided by the number of people, 10, and that's your fair premium, is $40,000. And you can tell it $4,000. And you can tell it's a fair premium because if you charge everyone that, so you put 4,000 in here, right, for everyone, and add all those things up, add this whole thing up, it comes out to 40,000. So a fair premium is where the total losses, 40,000, equals the total premiums, 4,000. Following that? Okay. Let's take, so that's the math. 10 people, 2,000, 20,000 total. Average cost is 20,000 divided by 10, the number of people. That's 2,000 to 2,000. So now let's say there are 2 types of people. There are those who get into accidents, and there are those who don't get into accidents. So the ones who, so of the 10 people, 5 are going to get into accidents, and 5 are not going to get in accidents. And the 5 who get in accidents are going to be, it's going to cost them 4,000 each. What's the fair premium in this case? Well, good example 2. You have these 5 people, 4,000. You have these 5 people, 0. Add up the total amount, 20,000. Divide by the number of people, 10. And so again, 2,000 is the fair premium. So in this case, the way that this one differs from this one, let me go back and change this back to the way it was. So the way that that number 2 differs from number 1, it's the same total losses, 20,000. Only in this case, there are 5 people who make $4,000 losses, and there are 5 people who do 0. Okay, following that? Nod your heads if you followed that. All right. So 5 times 0, 5 people times 0 is 0. 5 people times 4,000 is 20,000. 20,000 divided by 10, the number of people, is 2,000. That's called the average cost. The average cost is just the total cost divided by the number of people. So you end up with $2,000. So how about this? So suppose the same thing, 5 people who are going to get in accidents, 5 people who aren't going to get in accidents. This time the insurance company can identify who the 5 people are. What's the fair premium now? Just recall, in number 2, you had 5 people going to get accidents, 5 who weren't going to get accidents, but the insurance company doesn't know. Now the insurance company, come back. Now the insurance company does know who they are. So what's the fair premium? Well, what's the fair premium for these 5 here? Yeah. For how much are these people going to cost? 0. What's the fair premium for these 5 here? 4,000. Right? So in this case, these people, the fair premium is 0 because the insurance company can see who they are. So it's 0. In this case, it's 4,000 because the insurance company can see who they are. So they just charge the people what it cost them. So that's a case then where if the insurance company can see who you are, can tell the types, right? So they know that Sam, Koji, Madison, Max, and Comedy are all types who get into accidents, then they'll just charge them $4,000. What if they tried to charge Linda, Michael, Alan, Candace, and Josh $4,000? What would Linda, Michael, Alan, Candace, and Josh do? If you were them, what would you do? Well, it depends, right? Depends if you also know that you're not going to get in any accidents. If you also know that you're not going to get in accidents, and so you think, I'm a good driver. I know I'm not going to get in accidents. And they're trying to charge me $4,000. So what are you going to do? Go find another insurance company, right? Because you're going to say, some other insurance company will come in and say, hey, I'll give you insurance not for 4,000, for 2,000. And some other insurance company will come and say, 2,000, I'll give it to you for 1,000. So basically they just bid down until your fair premium is basically 0 because you're not going to get an accident. But the key here is that that's when the insurance company knows who you are, what your type is, and you know what your type is. When that happens, then it's not really insurance anymore because there's no uncertainty. They know, you know. So, okay. The math is still the same, right? But the difference now is that because they can what's called segment the market, they can tell the different types, is that then they'll charge you different amounts. So the fair premium in this case, come back. The fair premium is that they'll go through and that they'll just charge you what your expected losses. Okay. So for car insurance, who's likely to get more in more accidents? Say it again. New drivers, males, people who drive fancy or hot, like a. In fact, one time my car got totaled, and just driving along, someone pulled out and totaled my car, and so I had to go get a new car. And at the time, we had this neighbor kid living with us because he got kicked out of his house, and he was 18 years old, and he's fighting with his dad, so he was living with us for a bit. And so I had to go buy a new car, and this kid says, hey, I'll show you. I'll go car shopping with you. And it turned out he knew a lot about cars. And I hate car shopping, don't know anything about cars. So I said, fine, let's go. So we went out car shopping. And we looked at all these different cars, and we go in this one lot. and he looks and he sees a Subaru Impreza. He goes, "That's a really good car." I thought, "Oh, okay." So we went for a drive, and sure enough, it was a nice car. And come back, say, "Good news, honey. I bought a Subaru Impreza." And my wife, she cares about cars even less than I do. So all she cared about was how much it cost. So I said, "Well, it was a little bit more expensive, but our lodger says it's a great car." And so great. So I called up the insurance company and I said, "Okay, just had a car total, just bought a new car, so I want to register it." And the guy says, "Okay, what type?" And I said, "A Subaru Impreza." He goes, "Ooh." And I thought, uh-oh. He goes, "What kind? A WRX or a ZTV?" And I thought, uh-oh. And it turned out that Subaru Imprezas were very, very popular among 18-year-old boys who liked cars. And within a week, it was stolen. Someone took the car out from in front of our place. And as soon as it was stolen, because what happens a lot is that, when the car gets stolen, this was in New Zealand. So when the car gets stolen, they just take it for joyrides. And sometimes they burn it, but oftentimes what they do is they just drive around for a while, and for a day or so, then they just leave it. And so a lot of cars get stolen and then found later on. And I thought, and so as soon as it was stolen, I called the insurance company and I said, "It's been stolen." And they said, "Well, do you want to wait and see if it gets recovered?" And I said, "Nope, I don't. I don't want to see if it gets recovered." And so we settled on it. And sure enough, it was found like 2 days later. But by that point, and so this time I went down to the Toyota dealership and I said, "So show me a car that 18-year-old boys really hate." And I did. And the guy takes me to this station wagon, this Toyota Corolla station wagon. Didn't even say Toyota on it. He goes, "This one here." I said, "That's the car for me." And sure enough, never got stolen, got broken into a bunch, but never got stolen beyond that. So the point being is that, obviously the Subaru WRX was identified as that's a, and so my insurance went down a lot. And I went from the Subaru WRX into the Toyota Corolla boring family wagon type thing. So the type of car you drive, right? That's one thing. Whether or not you're a new driver, all these different factors. But what they're doing, as we explained last time, what they're doing is that they're putting you into a risk category. So they don't actually know how many accidents you're going to get into, you personally. But they can put you into risk categories, and they can figure out with pretty good accuracy how many accidents you in that risk category are going to have on average. And how did they do that? If you remember last time we talked about like how, they put you into a risk category, and that this is like the average cost of accidents for that category, right? And that when they get lots and lots of people who are very similar, is that what happens is that it starts to go like that. And then when they get a whole lot of people who are similar, it means it goes like this, right? It gets they become very certain about what their average cost is going to be. So that's what insurance companies do. That's why insurance companies want to get, insurance companies specialize, right? Some insurance companies will specialize in, like Geico. Geico seems to be going for the youth market because they always seem to advertise on sporting events and things like that. So they're, I think, what they're thinking is that, well, we're going to focus on kind of young drivers and get a whole bunch of different types of young drivers in the same category. We'll charge them more than we will older drivers, but as long as we get a lot of them the same, we can predict what their rates are going to be. So in reality, that's the way insurance companies work. They go through and that they segment the market, they figure out what your risk is, and then they go through and that they, based upon your risk, that's how they figure out what your premium is going to be, because they, based upon your risk, that's your average number of accidents you're going to have. So when something happens, like you drop out of school, then you suddenly move from this risk category to this risk category, and so they charge you more. When you get married, they move you back and they charge you less because you're moving into a different risk category. Okay, so that's the law of large numbers. Law of large numbers. That's what that's called. All right, so let's take the insurance company that can see two types of people now, and that they know that there's a high risk. And so they have 5 people, and that those 5 people, they know 3 of them are going to get in accidents, and that each accident is going to cost $5,000. and they have another pool of 5 people that are low risk people. One of them will have an accident and cost 5,000. So now, well, what's the fair premium? Well, now you have 5 people, 3 accidents. So 3 times 5,000 is equal to $15,000. So you divide the 15,000 by the 5, the number of people, and their average cost is going to, the expected cost is going to be $3,000 per person. And down here in the low risk, you have 5 people that they're going to have 1 accident, so that their average cost for the whole group is 5,000. So their the total cost for the group is 5,000. So the average cost is $1,000 per person. So the fair premium for this group, the high risk group, is what? It's the fair premium for the high risk group. $3,000, right? What's the fair risk premium for the low risk group? $1,000. It's not saying is that each of the people in the low risk group is going to have a claim worth $1,000. Only one person will have a claim, but it's going to be worth 5,000. So the average claim is only, the average amount for that group is $1,000. This is group insurance. Group insurance is when they go through and that they basically charge everyone in the group the same amount. So like right here in UC Merced, employees have group insurance, means that we all pretty much pay the same thing for our insurance. So what they've done is they take us as a university employees and they put us into a risk pool with all, and they know the average cost of all sorts of other university employees. And so then they figure out how much we're going to cost, and then that's what they charge each person. So it means that, I am charged the same amount as somebody who is 20 years younger and much less likely to have health problems because we're in a group. Following that? Okay. All right. So the math is the same in this case. 3 people, $5,000 each. You multiply them together, you get 15,000. The low risk, 1 person at 5,000. So then you just divide by this by the total, by the number of people. So 15,000 by 5 is 3,000, and 5,000 divided by 5 is 1,000. So that's your fair premium in each case. Okay. So the key then is for insurance companies to put everyone into homogeneous groups, right? And so what they want is that what it means is that insurance company is looking at you and thinking about, well, what's your risk? And they're assuming that you know your risk. So they're assuming that you kind of know what your risk categories are, what your risk is going to be, and that they are then going through and that they're trying to figure out what your risk is. And based upon that, they'll put you in different types of groups. Okay. Let's turn to health insurance now. What determines high and low cost people? From an insurance standpoint, who tends to cost more money? Yeah. Elderly? Mm-hmm. People with chronic conditions? Yeah. Yeah. People with chronic conditions? Women? Women tend to use more healthcare than men. Women, people who do risky things. So if you skydive, things like that, things you get injured more. So there are various things that kind of go along. Also, people who have family history of like, if you have a family history of breast cancer, is that then you're in a higher risk category. If you had some diseases as a child, you're in a higher risk category. If you have a high ACEs score, adverse childhood experience score, you're in a higher risk category. So there's lots of things that come along that can kind of differentiate people's expected cost. And so what health insurance companies have done traditionally is that they've gotten as much information for you as possible, and then they put you into these risk categories. So if you're in a group setting, then they figure it out for the group, right? They don't differentiate you as an individual. But if you are trying to buy insurance by yourself, so if you don't have group insurance, right, then it means that the insurance company is looking at you and what your risk is, and they're trying to assess what your risk is, and they're going to charge you based upon what your risk is. So the way that that it's worked in the United States is that if you have employer-based insurance, that's group insurance, is that then you get insurance and you just pay what everyone else in your group gets. And your employer may have, a good plan, may have a bad plan, but at least that, you're all going to be charged pretty much the same. If your employer doesn't have, if you're self-employed, unemployed, or your employer doesn't offer insurance, like a lot of low-income jobs, then you have to try and get insurance yourself. And so the way you get insurance yourself used to be is that you would go to, Aetna insurance company, and you would say, well, how much are you, how much are you going to charge me for insurance? And what Aetna would do is Aetna would look at your family history and look at your, medical records and look at everything else. And then based upon that, they'd either say, well, we're not going to insure you, or they would say, well, it's going to cost you this amount, and they give you some amount that's going to cost you. Because what they're doing then is they're doing individual insurance. They're based upon your risk category. Okay, so let's say that you have 4 groups of people. You have low risk people, you have medium risk, higher risk, and then the highest risk people. And what this is then, this is the number of times that they're going to visit the hospital. And suppose it costs $1,000 every time they visit the hospital. So now what's the fair premium? Well, take the first case. So, suppose that the insurance company can tell the difference between people. In that case, you have 800 people. They're not going to visit the hospital at all, so they're going to cost their expected cost is 0. You have 100 people who expect to visit 1 time, their cost is 1,000. You have 70 people who visit 2 times, their cost is 2,000. And then you have 30 people who visit 5 times, their cost is 5,000. So what's the fair premium? Yeah. Say it louder. Well, what's the fair premium for this group? 0, right? Because if the insurance company can tell who they are, then they know they're not going to cost anything. What's the fair premium for this group? 1,000, right? 2,000, 5,000. So again, if the insurance company can actually tell who you are, then they're going to charge you based upon your risk of your group. So even if you're in this group here, the high risk group, and you're not ever going to use, you end up never using the hospital, you're still going to be charged $5,000 because that's your risk group. You're in the risk group that says, on average, you're going to cost $5,000. So what it looks like then is this, right? Here's all the people, number of different type of claims, in this case, hospitalizations. And this is the cost. So, well, first off, this is the total number of people, right? Add them up, 8 plus 1, it comes out to 1,000 people. Then the loss per person is basically the number of accidents times the 1,000. So that then the total amount is essentially then the number of people here times the loss per person. It's like, it's this. We'll get rid of this. I'll show you. Okay. In this case, you take 800 times the loss per person. That's 0. And this one is 100 times the loss per person. So it's 100,000. This is equal to 70 times the loss per person. And this is equal to 30 times the loss per person. So that it's $390,000. Then the average amount is 390,000 divided by 1,000, the number of people. And so that's the average loss per all groups. But the fair premium, since they can tell who it is, it's basically they just charge people based upon what their expected losses of their group. What if the insurance company can't tell the difference between the different groups? Then what's the fair premium? If the insurance company can't tell the difference, then what's the fair premium? It's on there someplace. Say it again. 390. Yep, it's 390. Because essentially that means if they can't tell the difference, then it's just 390. Because they charge everyone the same. So this group, they would be charged 390. This group here, 390. This group, 390. This group, 390. And again, it comes out as the same, right? The total of the premiums equals total losses, just that now they have to charge everyone the same amount. So it's this here. Number 6 then is when insurance company can't tell. Right? Following that? Okay. Insurance company can't tell. So the point is that if the insurance company can tell the different groups and can charge different groups different amounts, then they will. If the insurance company can't tell the difference between different groups, or for some reason can't charge people different amounts, then they have to charge the same thing. Now, in this case, if you're suppose you're in group 1, right? Suppose that that you're a low risk group here, right? Group 1. And that your expected number of accidents is 0, but they can't tell, and so they're going to charge you 390. Then what are you going to do? Yeah, or not buy insurance, right? Not buy insurance because you're thinking, well, wait a minute, I know that I am a low risk person, and I know that as a low risk person is that my expected cost is 0. So therefore, why am I paying 390 as for just this? On the other hand, if you're a high risk group, if you know you're high risk, then your expected loss is 5,000, but you're paying 390. So you're going, woohoo! It's a great day, because it means that you're going to go through and that you're based, if you had to pay this out of pocket, you'd be paying 5,000, but really you only have to pay 390,000. Okay. So why might insurance companies not be able to charge different amounts? Is there a case whereby, so put away the Affordable Care Act for a second. Is there a situation where you know more about your risk than the insurance company does? Is there something where you know your risk more than the insurance company might? Yes. Genetic testing. So anyone in here ever gotten genetic testing? So what you do with genetic testing is you go and you go on here. We'll go on it. We'll go on 23andMe. Right. So 23andMe. You ever heard of 23andMe? Yeah. So 23andMe is basically a site that you can go and you can get genetic testing. So what you do is that they'll send you a little kit, and that then you give a swab, and then they have different types of things that you can look at. So they can look at like ancestry, basically where you're from. They can also do your health, so they can go through and check to see what's your probability of what's your likelihood of getting diabetes and getting things like that. So they'll do a whole health screening for you, and then they'll send you back the results. And so the results will say things like, I don't think they probably show the results, but what they do is that they can come through and they'll say, well, like, for some things, like a Huntington's disease. Huntington's disease is a condition whereby if you have the genetic marker, you're going to get Huntington's disease. And you're going to die in your early 40s, late 40s, around in there. And it's not and there's nothing they can do. So if you have the gene for Huntington's disease, you're going to get the condition, and that's it. And so you can do a genetic test, and they can tell you whether or not you have the gene for Huntington's disease. So if you come from a family history of Huntington's disease, then some people are going to have the gene, some won't. So it can be very important to know for your family planning purposes is do you have are you going to basically die at age 40, or are you going to be around for a while? On the other hand, that's a disease that's called a high penetrance gene. High penetrance refers to the likelihood that if you get the gene, that you're going to get the condition. The BRCA gene, right, for breast cancer, BRCA gene for breast cancer is somewhere around, well, it's between like 40 and 80%, depending upon the type of genetic makeup, but somewhere between 40 and 80%. Means that if you have have the gene for breast cancer, is that then you have a fairly high risk of getting breast cancer. Not certainty, right? But a fairly high risk. And then if you then go through but there's other things like for diabetes where maybe it tells you that, that the risk of the population is 5% and your risk is 10%. So you have a slightly elevated risk. So that's the type of information you get from genetic testing. Now, when genetic testing first started to become publicly available, is that back in the 2000s, insurance companies, they wanted to basically be able to see your genetic information, right? So they wanted to basically, before they gave you insurance, they wanted to see what your genetic information is. How many would say, I am fine with the insurance company seeing my genetic information, versus no, I don't think the insurance company should see my genetic information? So what do you think? Go no, no, no. Anyone yes? No and yes. Okay. So you're all no. And why not? Yeah. Yep. What if they find something out and they make it more expensive? Would that be fair? Why?
Because technically it's for them, but
why isn't it fair for you?
Because if we're born with it, how can we change that? We can't.
The insurance company feel the retort is that because you're born with it, you can't change it, right? The insurance company is, we feel your pain, but we're there just to look at what it's going to cost. And so if you have a genetic marker for Huntington's disease and you don't have a genetic marker for Huntington's disease, and we charge you both the same amount, then she's paying too much because she doesn't have the genetic marker and you do. So what insurance companies said is they said, fine, if no one gets genetic information, that's fine. But if you're going to be able to get your genetic information, then they should be able to get your genetic information, because otherwise your risk category more than they do. And so the idea was that, well, like suppose that you got a genetic test and you found out you had a 90% chance of having colon cancer, right? Versus you get a genetic test and you find out that you have minimal chance of anything. Well, in the first case, you're probably going to be more likely to buy insurance that covers colon cancer, right? Because you think, well, there's a good chance I'm going to have this. Well, if the insurance company doesn't know that, then you're still going to be put into a low risk category, even though you're a high risk person. So that means that they're going to be charging you too little. So therefore, what they would say is they'd say, well, fine, if no one gets genetic information, that's fine. But if anyone gets genetic information, then we get the genetic information too, because otherwise, people are going to be going and buying, people who are high risk are going to be buying too much insurance, for what it's cost, and people with low risk, that you're going to feel like you're getting screwed because you're paying too much. So this was an issue because in the first parts of the 2000s, when genetic testing first came out, what the insurance companies what everyone sort of thought. Everyone thought that what was going to happen is, did you ever see the movie Gattaca? You ever heard of the movie Gattaca? Yeah, go watch it this weekend. It's an old movie. It's pretty, pretty cheesy, but the idea of it is that, you can basically just, it's in the future. And so they can just sort of prick your finger and that they can tell from your genetic information when you're going to die, like what type of disease you're going to have when you're going to die with perfect certainty. And so there was this kind of idea that that's what was going to happen. I mean, this is not that long ago, right? 20 years ago, is that this idea that that's where we are moving to. We're moving to a place whereby, they would be able to just, they pick up something that you've picked up, they scrape your genetic information and they can tell all these different things about you. And so as a result, there was all this push to get privacy on genetic information, because the thought being is that you didn't want insurance companies to have and other people to have all this genetic information because they'd be able to tell all these personal things about you. And it kind of died away as an issue, and it died away for a couple of reasons. One is it died away because genetic testing didn't turn out to be that useful, really. I mean, if you look, like even now, 25 years, 30 years after the human genome, you don't really have that much that deals with genetic testing in medicine. There are some drugs that they will do a genetic test to sort of see if one drug works better than another. So that it's in that kind of way it's been done, but not really, not like I think they initially thought it was going to just revolutionize medicine. At least I haven't seen it. Maybe in some subset fields it's done it, but for the average way that we get healthcare, it really hasn't. And the reason is because it turns out that there are very few high penetrance type of genes. There's a lot of low penetrance genes, meaning that your risk goes from 10 to 15%. But then, beyond that, then it turns out that what's really important is epigenetics, is not just your gene, but also your environment. And so two people, they started to realize that, well, what causes a gene to express is not just a randomness about it, but it's things within the environment. So now it means that they're having to figure out not just your genes, but also all the stuff about your environment, what you eat and where you live and all those other things. And it just became really, really complicated. So that's one reason, is that genetics turns out to be not that useful for predicting your health like they thought it was going to be. The second is that when the debate started about to limit genetic information, and a lot of countries were starting to push through legislation that said insurance companies can't get your genetic information, is insurance companies really backed off because what was going to be thrown in this was not genetic information, but another type of information that's even more useful. So like what type of information is even more useful than for predicting your health than genetic information? Family history. Family history turns out to be really, really, in a lot of ways, a much better predictor than genetic information for predicting your health. I mean, they're related, obviously, right? Because if it's a breast cancer gene, you're inheriting it. And so if you get 3 members of your family who've died of breast cancer, then it's a pretty high probability that your family has a breast cancer gene. But also it's that, you tend to live in the same socioeconomic conditions as your family. And so therefore it kind of somewhat controls for that epigenetics part. And so, they were really afraid that what was going to happen is that these countries would come through and say, not only can you not get genetic information, but you also can't get family history. And they really wanted family history. So they backed off. But then the third reason in the US was Affordable Care Act, right? Affordable Care Act comes through and it says that no longer can you differentiate people, charge people different amounts based upon any pre-existing conditions. In fact, under the Affordable Care Act, what can you charge people differently for? Like if you go in covered California, people pay somewhat different rates on covered California. But what factors can they charge you different amounts for? Whether you have a chronic condition. Can they charge you different amounts if you have a chronic condition? No, that's a pre-existing condition. Whether you are currently have cancer, whether you have, a history of diabetes in your family, can they charge you different amounts on that? No, all that's gone. They can't charge you different amounts for that. The only thing they can charge you different amounts for is your age bracket, smoking status, gender. Think they can charge you different amounts for gender? No, no different amounts for gender. Somewhat on region, so they can charge you different amounts for region, the region you live in, just for the cost of healthcare and things. But that's it. So it got rid of this whole thing about family history. Everything else the insurance company used to look at is out the window. Good thing? Was it a good thing? I'm going to say yes, it was a good thing that the ACA did this. They didn't have to do that, right? Another option that was going on the table before the Affordable Care Act was what they did in Minnesota, where they basically said, that insurance companies can basically charge you whatever. But if you turned out to be a really high risk person, there was another pool of money that insurance companies would pay for it. So what insurance companies were what Minnesota was trying to do is basically say, look if you end up with people who are in this high risk group, is that you won't have to pay $5,000. All you have to pay for them, insurance company, is $2,000, and we'll pay the other $3,000 for them. So they created this high risk pool. And so, what that was doing is sort of taking away some of these really, really high risk people. So they could have done that. They could have just left it, but instead they came through and they said, everyone basically gets charged the same amount. So who benefits from that? High risk people, right? Who loses from that? Low risk people. Who are low risk? Who's an example of a low risk person? Well, healthy people, right? Healthy people that tend to be young people. So young people tend to be, so what it means is that the Affordable Care Act is that you ended up paying more than you probably would normally pay because you were subsidizing all of the high risk people. Did they know this when they started the Affordable Care Act? They know that this was going to be an issue? Yes, they knew it was going to be an issue. How did they overcome it in the Affordable Care Act? How did they deal with it, try and soften the blow on young people, on healthy people? What did they do to try and soften the blow? Well, what does the Affordable Care Act do besides say no pre-existing conditions? What else does it do? Expands rhymes with Redi-Cal. Medi-Cal expands Medi-Cal, right? Why did it expand Medi-Cal? Why not just sort of say everyone goes and covered in California? Well, you expand Medi-Cal because what that does, or Medicaid, because what that does is that takes a whole group of low income people and say, okay, you don't have to worry about it. So it did that, then gave subsidies for covered California. So it says, well, okay, if you don't qualify for Medi-Cal, because Medi-Cal is only 138 of the poverty line, so it's not that, it's not that many people are below 138 of the federal poverty line. So, but then it says, well, if you don't qualify for Medi-Cal, or if you're in a state that can adopt Medi-Cal, then we'll give you subsidies. So they're trying to do it that way, right? Then what else did they do? What's the individual mandate? What's the individual mandate? Now, we talked about this ad nauseum. What's the individual mandate? Go Google individual mandate. I'll wait. What's the individual mandate?
The individual mandate is a provision within the Affordable Care Act that requires individuals to purchase minimum essential coverage or face a tax penalty unless they were eligible for an exemption.
That's right. So the individual mandate means that everyone has to purchase health insurance, right? So why did they put the individual mandate in there? Because otherwise, what would happen is that they were afraid that all you young, healthy people would say, forget it, I'm not going to buy health insurance. And so therefore you drop out, and that's what's called adverse selection. So adverse selection is what happens, is what they were trying to avoid. So that's why they came through and they said, well, you can get rid of you can say no pre-existing conditions, but what it means is that everyone's in the same pool, basically. The high risk and the low risk people are in the same pool. And so now, what do you do? Well, you have to get people to buy health insurance. And the way you get people to buy health insurance is you require them to buy health insurance. You say that there's an individual mandate that you have to buy health insurance. Okay. So now let's see. So keep that in mind because we're going to talk later on about what adverse selection is. But now let's go through what happens if you have co-payments and deductibles. So what's your intuition tell you? If you have well, first off, what's a co-payment? What's a deductible? Yeah. Yep. Amount that you have to pay before the health insurance kicks in. And a co-payment? Percent that you pay. Yeah, every visit or every co-payment is how much you pay per visit. So like if you go to the doctor and you have to, or go to the pharmacy and you buy a drug, get a prescription and they say, well, that's going to be $40, let's say. The price of that drug is probably not $40. It's probably, $100. And so your insurance company is paying a certain amount, and then the amount you pay, that's the copay. If you go to the GP, there's usually they make you pay, like it used to be that when we went to the doctor, we had to pay $3 when we got there. I used to think, $3? Why are we paying $3 to bring children to the doctors? Why are we paying $3? That was the copay. And it turns out that there's a reason for it, which we'll discuss later, why $3. But what that is, that's a copay. Because what they found is that if you have any copay, it tends to reduce excess use of healthcare. So that's why they use copays. And copay is just the amount that you have to pay when you show up there. Okay, so let's take a deductible. Let's take a deductible. The deductible is the amount that you have to pay before the insurance kicks in. So what that means is that, oh, I know. We just had in our car got during the wintertime, we had a big snowfall where I was, like 6 feet of snow, big snowfall. And on the tops of a lot of our pine trees fell down, and one fell down on the car and smashed the side of the car, the window off, or I mean the side mirror. And so I was thinking, okay, do I make a claim for it? So I was thinking about making a claim, but then I got an estimate about how much it was going to cost, and it was going to cost about $250 to replace the side mirror. So I didn't make a claim for it. And the reason was because my deductible is $500, meaning that I have to pay the first $500 of everything that comes along. And then after that, then they kick in and they'll pay for it. So since that was less than $500, I just had to pay the $250. But then a couple weeks later I had a mouse in the car. You ever had a mouse in your car? That mouse are horrible in cars. They get in and you can't get them out. And so what I do is what they'll do is they'll eat all your wires. So they're not good, right? To have these mice in your car. And plus it's just kind of weird when you open up the trunk and there's a mouse sitting there. It's just bad. It's bad. So I put a trap in there thinking I was going to catch this mouse. So I put a little dab of peanut butter on this trap. And then I put the trap in the trunk, closed the trunk up, and I was all set. And I go out the next morning and the door is open to the car. And I thought, that's weird. I'm sure I shut the door. And I go and I look, and the entire back seat is ripped out. Just like the whole back seat is just peeled down. And it turns out that a bear came by, and the bear can open the door. They know how to open the doors of Toyotas because they just put their claws under and open it. And it smelled that little bit of peanut butter, And so it decided that it was going to go through and find out what that was. And so it just put its claw on the seat and then just bent down the metal. So the entire seat was just folded over in two. So I took that down to the audit. Well, first off, I called up and I said that I had this problem with my car. And the woman, at first she didn't believe me, but then I think she thought no one's going to make that up. So I took it down here to California Collision, and that it was going to cost $1,500 to fix it, to fix the back seat. So I got it done because I paid the first 500, but then they paid the next 1,000 of it. That's a deductible. Deductible is you pay the first amount for it, and then they kick in the rest. I was an idiot because I should have said, oh, and the bear also broke our side mirror too. And the bear also, because then once you pay the deductible, then they pay everything above that, right? So if it was 1,500, then you pay 500 and they pay 1,000. If it was 5,000, then I pay 500 and they pay 4,500. If it was 10,000, I pay 500 and they pay 9,500. So once you go above your deductible, then they pay it all. That's what a deductible is. So what do you think happens to premiums when you have deductibles? Has anyone ever rented a car? Anyone ever rented a car? Well, when you rent a car, oftentimes they'll ask you what type of deductible you want for your car insurance. And you can get $250, $500, or $1,000. What do you think, when is the premium the cheapest? When you get the $250 deductible, the $500 deductible, or the $1,000 deductible? So that as the deductible goes up, do premiums become more expensive or less expensive? How many say more expensive? How many say less expensive? The answer is less expensive. And the reason is because you're paying more of it, so therefore they pay less. So they pay less, that means the fair premium, the total amount of loss goes down, and so the premiums go down. So take this here. Okay, so now let's say insurance company can't tell the difference, and there's between high and low risk, and there's a $500 deductible. So can't tell the difference. That means that everyone's going to get the same premium, right? And there's a $500 deductible. So we have the same number of accidents, 0, 1, 2, and 5. That means that the total amount lost per person is 0, 1,000, 2,000, and 5,000. And there's a $500 deductible. Whoops, should be you pay the first 500. There's a $500 deductible. So in that case, how much does this person get rid of all these numbers? So if there's a $500 deductible, how much will this person pay out of pocket? The first group, how much do they pay out of pocket? Well, what's their losses?
Oh, 0.
Sure. So they pay 0. These people, they have losses of 1,000. So how much do they pay? 500, right? That's the deductible. So they pay 500. This group pays 500. And this group pays 500. Right? Everyone pays 500 because they all have the same deductible. So how much did the insurance company pay for this person? Well, the insurance company is going to pay 0, right, for that person. How much did the insurance company pay for this person? Yeah, they're going to pay this amount, 1,000, minus the 500. How much did the insurance company pay for this person? 1,500, right? It's going to be equal to this amount minus that amount. This one is, yep, minus that amount. Yep. So then the amount per group is you take the number of people times how much it's going to cost the insurance company per person, 0. Number of people, 100, times 500. Just go all the way down. Come back. Okay. So now we have $290,000 in losses total. We have 1,000 people, so that's $290. So what's the fair premium? $290, right? That's the fair premium. Every group pays this amount fair premium. Right? So every group pays the same amount. And the total amount that they get in premiums is equal to the number of people times the premium they get. Take that down. So it looks like that. So there's the amount of losses, 290,000, and the premiums, 290,000. So that means this is the fair premium. What if your deductible was only $250? What if it's only $250? So just remember that right now, with a $500 deductible, you have $290. So now we're going to do a $250 deductible. So what's going to happen to premiums? Go up or go down? Will premiums go up as we go to a $250 deductible, or would they go down? Down. Let's see. So now, if it's only $250, then get rid of these things. So how much does this person pay in group 1? 0, right? How much does this person pay? How much does the people in group 2 pay? $250. How much do people in group 3 pay? $250. $250. So now, at a $250 deductible, the average premium goes up to $340. Right? Because now what's happened is that the insurance company is paying more. So the insurance company pays more out of the losses. If this thing goes up to 1,000, if the deductible goes up to 1,000, what's going to happen to insurance premiums? Go up or down? If it goes up to 1,000, will insurance premiums go up? Insurance premiums go down? Well, let's see. $1,000 deductible. Now, this person pays 0, right? How much does this person pay? 1,000. So notice that now the insurance company isn't paying anything for those people. How much does this people pay? 1,000. 1,000. So now, at a $1,000 deductible, insurance premium is $190. So that's why when you go into an auto dealership and they say, do you want a $250 deductible, a $500 deductible? I mean, not auto dealership, a rental car company. And they say, do you want $250, $500, or $1,000? If you want the cheapest premiums, you'd say 1,000. There's another reason that we'll get into why it is that you actually pay more at $250. Because what happens that at $250 is that then what rental companies also do is they put you in a different risk category. So like if you go through and that you say, I want a $250, then they're going to think themselves, oh, people who want low premiums tend to want, they tend to have more claims, so that they tend to, to go through and to get more accidents. So it means that they use the premium that you choose as kind of an indication of your risk. So really, when they go through and charge you, they won't charge you $340. They'll charge you more than that because they'll put you in a risk category. That's a high risk category. Whereas if you come through and say, give me 1,000, then you're saying is that you're betting pretty heavily that you're not going to get an accident. And so they say, oh, well, if they're willing to bet pretty heavily that you're not getting an accident, then you're a low risk person. This is an issue when you start looking at Covered California, because Covered California has 4 tiers, right? They have bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Platinum, close enough. Platinum. So, and that how do the plans differ? Well, they differ by their deductible, and they differ by their copayment. They differ in 2 ways. This one has a high deductible and a high copayment. And then this one has a low copayment and a lower deductible. So who is more likely to buy this plan? With a low deductible or low copayment? Who's more likely to buy that type of plan? People who use healthcare a lot, right? If you use healthcare a lot, then you probably want a low deductible and a low plan because you're going to go in there all the time and use healthcare. Whereas if you're someone who's not going to use healthcare very much, like you're a young person, then you may think, oh, forget it. I just, I want a high deductible and a high copayment because that means that my premiums are going to be lowest. So here, if you look at the premiums, these are the lowest. These are the highest. And the reason is partly because of just this math here, but also partly because it's signifying what group you're in. If you're someone who comes through and chooses a platinum plan, then they think either you've got a lot of money, right? Or they think, oh, well, you're someone who's going to use a lot of healthcare. And so they put you in a high risk group based upon that. How does the Affordable Care Act control? I mean, because what you could do if you wanted the low risk, if you just want these low risk people, right, then you could offer a low cost bronze plan and you have a really, really, really expensive high cost platinum plan. That way that, you wouldn't get very many high users. You'll just get, because they all want these people, right? They all want the low users. So, and they don't really want these high users. So how would you go through and kind of attract these people? Well, offer a really low premium here and offer a really high premium there. Because what that would do is it would cause, it would say anyone who's a high, who has lots of health conditions is going to say, whoa, that's way too expensive. So how do they control it? How does the Affordable Care Act get around that? Well, they say that the difference between these premiums can't be more than 4.5 times. That's why they put that in there, to try and get some type of to keep a bound within these premiums so that they can't go through and just use the premiums here to attract the low risk people. All right. So that's deductible, right? So we see how deductibles work. Then last thing is copayments. So copayments do pretty much the same thing as deductible. So here we'll have a 20% copayment. So I'll get rid of this. So get rid of all these numbers. Like that. All right. So if you have a 20% copayment, that means that you pay the first 20% of anything that's charged, or you pay 20% of whatever it is. So these people, these low 800 people here, how much are they going to pay? They're going to pay 0, right? Because they have no losses. How much are these people going to pay here, the group 2? Well, they're going to pay equal to 0.20% times this, right? Times 1,000. So they pay 200. How much will these people pay in group 3? Yeah, they pay 20% times So 400, and these people pay 1,000, 20% times 500. So then how much the insurance company pays? Well, the insurance company just sort of pays the difference between this here, this, minus whatever the person pays. Like that. So it fills it in, and you get essentially premiums of $312. So a 20% copayment, the premium is $312. So if we have a 30% copayment, is the premium going to go up or down? If you have a 30% copayment, will the premium go up or down? How many think up? How many say down? Well, the key is the insurance company paying more or less? If the insurance company pays less, it's going to go down. If the insurance company pays more, it's going to go up. So, okay, so now go through, figure this one out. Rather than 20%, now this is 30% like that. And move all the way down. So that now at 30%, the premiums are $273. So the higher the copayment, the lower the premiums. So that's why bronze is cheaper. Bronze has a higher copayment than platinum. All right. Insurance fund. So Simon 2 basically asks you to do this. So what I suggest you do, I put this Excel file online. So this Excel file is up there. The lectures, the lecture notes are up there. So what I would do is I would take a look at assignment 2, see if you can do it, and then ask me questions in class next Tuesday, because I'll be gone for the 26th and 28th. So if you want questions answered next Tuesday and Thursday, are the days to answer them.